I am back in the hills, in the mountains, and in the coulees, no less. I'm up here at 6:30 to attempt to get a sunrise, but there is blankets of cloud just chasing across the mountains. I'm back living on the east coast now, back on home turf, and back chasing some mythological stories, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? Hiking is about two things for me: eating nice food in scenic places and finding some old stuff to look at, some old rocks or something that has some sort of mythological tie-in to an ancient hero or story or something. And if you're looking for mythology, the Cualigne Mountains is not a bad place to start. I've been up here before in a couple of videos ago, where I traced the route of Queen Maeve's army during the Great Cattle Raid on Cualigne, but I didn't go up Sliabh Foy. Uncharacteristically, I never looked up anything about any lore or mythology associated with the mountain itself. And sure enough, I went digging and I came out with a cool little story. I feel as though, because the Cualigne is so famous in this area, no disrespect to it, it is our great epic in mythology, but it gets all the credit and kind of leaves any other little dribs and drabs of mythology and folklore kind of buried under this great story, and you have to go digging for it. I think it was in the 1930s, a lot of the schools in Ireland were asked to get the kids to talk to their older relatives, their grandparents, their parents, whoever, and ask them about stories in the area that they lived. And by asking these kids to talk to their grandparents, who could be 60 or 70, they were then travelling back to the late 1800s, to where an oral tradition still survived pretty well enough to get a huge amount of stories, which have all now been archived online on duchas.ie. But it's great for when you're looking for stories in a place that's already heavily doused with mythology. But today we're after Fionn MacCumhaill, another great hero of Irish mythology. Oh, this is rough. Oh yeah, this is the Saturday morning everybody's hoping for. Whoa! That actually wasn't so bad. There's a crossroads at the saddle between Barnavave and Sliabh Foy, where you can head over to Carlingford or up either mountain. I don't know if Barnavave counts as a mountain. I think it's just a big hill. But I'm pretty sure Sliabh Foy is a mountain, of which everybody can have an argument about, of what's considered a mountain and what is not. I go by a definition that is somewhat agreed upon within Ireland about prominence levels. But regardless, today I'm calling Sliabh Foy a mountain. So a lot of people from Ireland will know or have some idea of who Fionn MacCumhaill is. He seems to be a bit more well known than the likes of Cualigne. I'll give a brief introduction into Fionn MacCumhaill. He was the leader of the great band of warriors, the Fianna. He is known for eating salmon, which he shouldn't have eaten, much to the annoyance of Fionn. That's the salmon of knowledge. if anybody fancies dipping into that story, it's good crack. And he is the saviour of Tara from a fire-breathing god of the Tuatha De Danann, who lived on the Slieve Gullion. But because of Fionn's great deeds throughout his life, he's often portrayed as a giant, because his actions were just not doable by a normal human man. Which I find kind of interesting, because you just see that throughout history, and you see it sort of locally still. People being called on far more, which means the big man, which didn't necessarily mean that they were physically large, but their presence was large. Our greatest known far more is Michael Collins, not the astronaut, but the Irish revolutionary from Cork, who's called the big fella. I feel like on far more is applicable to Micheál Ó Cuailnge. So our man Fionn MacCumhaill was out with the Fianna one day, and they were hunting, and Fionn spotted a boar that was running up the side of the Cualigne Mountains and up Slieve Foy. So Fionn, not averse to a challenge, chased the boar up the mountain, which would be some run to keep up with a boar, because it's not the handiest of hikes. So Fionn gets to the top of Slieve Foy, and he kills the boar. He's so ravenous after running up the side of a mountain and battling a boar, which I can't imagine was too tricky for a man with such skills. He was knackered and he fell asleep, as you might do after eating an entire animal to yourself. And when Fionn woke up the next morning, expecting to see the rising sun from the Mourne Mountains, which we have a wonderful view of today, and reasonably enough, Fionn is fuming. He wakes up and it's cold and dark and miserable, looking forward to a nice sunrise similar to myself, and he's met with a great big shadow cast over the top of Slieve Foy across Carlingford Loch by an obnoxious giant named Rúscaire, which I don't know, there's something very Tolkien-esque about that name. I don't know what it is. Rúscaire, which translated from Irish means bruiser. So you know he was a hard lad. Rúscaire is, as I understand it, he is the embodiment of winter and cold. So he wakes up and he has a shouting match with him across Carlingford Loch, presumably telling him to, move on. Probably in not so kind a manner. So in a very Fionn MacCumhaill fashion, he got physical. 3 days of fighting commenced on the first day with fists. They knocked lumps out of each other. I'm assuming, it's not said in the stories, but I'm assuming they both descended from their respective mountains and met somewhere in the middle of Carlingford Loch and hashed it out. So the two of them bait the head off each other, but were fairly equally matched. On the second day, they brought weapons. They got the swords out. They clashed and attempted to hack away at each other, but again were closely matched. Each night they went back to their mountains and they got as much rest as they could before the sun came up again, and Rúscaire would make his effort to block the sun out from Fionn. On the third morning, Rúscaire, being a sneaky little snake, crept across the loch onto Slieve Foy, and he stole Fionn's sword, thinking, this will give me the upper hand now. I'll come at him with a sword and he'll have none and I'll definitely beat him. as is the joke with any rocks that look sort of out of place in Ireland, that stand out in the landscape, you tend to just say, probably something that Fionn MacCumhaill threw. I mean, we even say that the Isle of Man was a rock that Fionn MacCumhaill threw, and where that rock was where Loch Ness is, which is the largest lake in Ireland. So, you know, he had a good arm on him, Fionn. When Fionn woke up and discovered that his sword had been taken, he stood up once again in the shadow of Rúscaire, who was standing on the side of Sliabh Bán, picked up the biggest rock he could find, and he flung it right across the loch. It caught Rúscaire in the side of the head and crushed him into the side of the mountain. And that rock is still there on Cualigne. And after decades and centuries, his body melted away underneath on Cualigne, the big stone. And all that remains is that stone and the story attached to it. Fionn, now knackered, after days of fighting and arguing, and after picking up a stone and throwing it 5 kilometers that was the size of a small car, he lay down on top of the mountain and fell asleep. And the next morning, when the sun rose at last, there was no shadow cast on top of Sliabh Foy, and the rays of sun hit Fionn's skin and turned him to stone. And that was the end of Rúscaire, the giant of winter, which feels like a story describing the change from winter into spring. You find with most mythology in Ireland, there is some association with seasons and biodiversity. It's all very connected to the land, and in this case it would seem as though Fionn MacCumhaill represents the coming spring, the good guy, when you can start to grow food again. I think it's the 8th of March today, so it's right about now where you can start to sow seeds again, and you can start to notice a little bit more light in the evening, as we like to say, a grand stretch in the evening. I was recently hiking in the lower lands around here, and as is nice to do, I said hello to a group of sheep. I stopped and I looked at them and I said, how are you getting on? And I heard, how are you? And I absolutely shat myself. I turned around and all the sheep were just standing there, and there was one sheep in particular, and he was kind of hunched, like he was a big fella, big horns on him, and he was standing just to the side of the path and he was staring at me. And just for a split second I thought to myself, that's it now, I've had a good life, this is the end. And I looked behind me and I looked to my right, and there was this owl lad. You could have plucked him out of the 1920s. He was just leaning on an owl dry stone wall with his flat cap on and his farmer's jacket and everything, a little grin on his face. Knew he just absolutely frightened the shite out of me. And I just turned around and went, Jesus. It's like, you gave me a good fright there, man. He just went, I know. That's the kind of bog you don't come back from. That's a pond nearly. That's the kind of bog that they might find you in a couple of thousand years in. And the bog to be avoided. Okay, I'm going back up this hill. I'm not... Whoa! I just put my foot beside a big giant hole. I just fell at the top of my shoe going into it. The old ankle snapper. It's right on this nice windy spot here that Fionn was supposed to have caught the boar and killed it. While I'm waiting on that stove to get going, I'll show you what I brought for breakfast. Sticking with the theme of hunting boars, some sausages, some butter, and this. I made this yesterday. I don't know if anybody's done this, I'm sure they have, but it's a hybrid between a bannock and soda bread. The recipes are very similar. The only difference with bannocks have oat flour in it as well. It looks like a mini soda bread. Fionn MacCumhaill had ties with not just Ireland but with Scotland. I've dubbed this bread the Celtic cousin. I don't know if anybody's made this before. I'm sure they have, but I'm taking ownership of it. It's not the safest jar for carrying oil in. I've devised this in such a way that I shouldn't actually have to touch any raw meat, because get out your boy, come on. Because the last time I cooked raw meat out in the wild, let's just say it wasn't that sanitary and it got me the next day. I think I'd have been quicker finding a wild boar and killing it in Ireland than cooking sausages in maybe 3 or 4 degree weather in a cloud. I'll get the sausages cooked. I will get these sausages cooked. Okay, I'm calling these sausages done. Transfer sausages into a wow, awesome 5-second rule into me cup of sausages, because that's a normal thing to do. Lash off a piece of this butter. Oh yeah boy. Look at these lads. Warmed up a bit. Oh yeah. My wild boar and Irish/Scottish bread. That was worth it. Okay. That was some mission. I'm gonna pack up and start moving. This is a pretty good example of why you should know where you're going and have some maps and navigation things with you, because I've had visibility of about 10 meters for the last 15 minutes or so. I know this mountain reasonably well, but it is very easy to just lose your way. You can't see anything. Alright, I'm out of the clouds more or less, down from the peak back onto the saddle. I couldn't film anything coming down there. The fog, or the cloud, was so dense that you couldn't, it was too dangerous. I slipped maybe 4 or 5 times and went on my arse. always just nearly go in. Just like, you just go up to just about the ankle on the boot. Yup. Okay, easy sailing from here. I feel like I've paid some homage to the lad Fionn. So Rúscaire is dead. Winter has died. Spring has sprung. At the end of this story, it says that Fionn turns to rock on the top of Sliabh Foy, and you can see his outline from the top to the bottom, from his head to his feet. But according to the mythology, he's not dead at all. He's still knocking around. He's in a cave somewhere in Ireland. And so the prophecy goes that when Ireland is most in need of a great hero once again, that Fionn will emerge from his cave and come to our aid, our rescue. There's always an odd Catholic undertone with this mythology stuff. You can tell that the monks were the ones to write this stuff down, because that sounds familiar, doesn't it? But anyway, Fionn, if you want to buzz back and we can have a sausage sandwich up the top of Sliabh Foy, you're more than welcome. If you're unfamiliar with the work of David Cualigne and his stone lifting antics around Ireland, where he finds these great stones that were lifted by local men, they're serious stones, like they're up to 200 kilos and like crazy weights, you know, and maybe more than that. I'm not sure. But he's going around Ireland finding these stones and the mythology connected to them. And you see there a story about Fionn MacCumhaill, who's known as this fella who was unreal at lifting gigantic stones. If Fionn was a real fella, which I'm inclined to believe he was, I tend to decide on this stuff being based in reality, just surrounded with good storytelling. In other words, spoofs, but that they were based on real people. Sometimes multiple people accumulated into this one character or whatever, but stone lifting was a huge part of Irish culture and Scottish culture and Icelandic culture, and basically anywhere where there was a Gaelic influence, it seems, right up until maybe 100, 150 years ago, in around the times after the famine. So having these stories about Fionn, this great stone lifter who was able to fling, you know, stones that were just completely immovable by a human, as I demonstrated earlier. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense in the mind of the 2,000-year-old person looking for some entertainment, sitting by the fire, chilling by the Fullacht Fia with the lads, waiting on the deer to cook. And you go, here, Zen, and tell us that story about Fionn again there, will you? Which one is that? Do you know the one about the big stone there? Ah, yeah. That's what it's all about. It could just be the legacy of this great stone lifter. I'll see you next time, maybe at another big rock somewhere in Ireland. I'm sure there'll be some good story attached to it anyway.